Coffee originates from the highlands of East Africa, specifically from the Kaffa province in Ethiopia. There, a type of coffee plant grows, which was domesticated by local people in ancient times. The fruit of this plant, known as a coffee cherry, holds two beans. Once roasted and ground, these beans are brewed in hot water to create coffee. This beverage, called buna, follows trade routes and reaches the port of Mocha around the beginning of the second millennium. In Arabic, the drink is called kawwa, a word that originally referred to wine, possibly linked to the origins of Kaffa. The drink is initially consumed mainly in Sufi monasteries, where it becomes a part of religious practices. The cultivation of coffee plants spreads to the highlands of Yemen. Over time, coffee becomes increasingly popular among the Yemeni people. It travels along pilgrimage routes to Mecca, where it gains popularity and spreads throughout the Muslim world, especially in the Mamluk Sultanate. The first coffee houses open, becoming places for socializing, conversation, and games. However, some conservative imams in Mecca become concerned about the stimulating effects of coffee and attempt to ban it. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire conquers a region, and the Turks, who call the drink kav, lift the ban. Coffee becomes very popular in Constantinople. Venetian merchants, connected to Mediterranean trade routes, discover coffee, which they call café, and introduce it to Europe. At this time, coffee remains expensive because Mocha controls its trade, preventing the sale of coffee plants or cherries to protect its monopoly. Despite these restrictions, an Indian pilgrim named Baba Budan smuggles 7 coffee cherries into India and begins modest cultivation there. Meanwhile, the Dutch and the English established trading posts in the Indian Ocean, allowing them to directly trade with Mocha and import coffee to Europe without going through Egypt. The first coffee houses opened throughout Europe, but coffee remains rare and costly, mostly enjoyed by the elite. The Dutch East India Company seeks to dominate this valuable market by cultivating coffee themselves. They acquire coffee cherries from Yemen and import them to Java, where the high altitude and climate are perfect for growing coffee. In 1706, the Dutch sent a coffee plant to Amsterdam, which eventually becomes the ancestor of most coffee plants today. The plant is kept in heated greenhouses for research, and as it is self-pollinating, new plants are cultivated from its seeds. In 1713, during the Treaty of Utrecht, the mayor of Amsterdam presents several coffee plants to King Louis XIV of France. These plants are placed in royal greenhouses, but Louis XIV demands even more plants for French coffee production. He sends an expedition to acquire coffee plants from Yemen and establish them on Bourbon Island. Simultaneously, Javanese coffee production becomes significant enough to compete with Mocha coffee in Europe. The Dutch also established new plantations in Ceylon, Sumatra, and Suriname, using plants sent from Amsterdam. In 1721, a French captain receives 2 coffee plants from the royal greenhouses and transports them to Martinique, where coffee production begins. The cultivation soon spreads throughout the French Antilles. In French Guiana, coffee production also begins after plants are secretly obtained from Suriname. The Portuguese king, keen on this market, sends an ambassador to French Guiana under the guise of discussing borders, but secretly to acquire coffee cherries. The ambassador succeeds and returns to Brazil to begin coffee cultivation. As coffee production spreads, it becomes easier for other nations to acquire coffee plants or cherries. The British start cultivating coffee in Jamaica, and the Spanish do so in the Philippines. In the Americas, coffee cultivation is supported by the triangular trade, which provides European colonies with many African slaves. Global coffee production increases, and prices drop, making coffee more accessible in Europe and North America. After the Boston Tea Party of 1773, American revolutionaries reject tea, now seen as unpatriotic, and begin drinking coffee instead. France becomes the world's largest coffee producer, thanks to its Bourbon and Antilles coffee. Its wealthy colony of Saint-Domingue produces half the world's coffee, which is even sold in markets in Cairo and Amsterdam. In 1789, the French Revolution takes place, and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen is proclaimed. This inspires slaves and freedmen on the island to revolt against wealthy landowners. In 1804, Haiti gains independence, and many French settlers flee to Jamaica and Cuba to continue coffee cultivation. In 1822, Brazil gains independence and focuses on coffee cultivation to develop its economy. The country imports many African slaves, despite European bans on the slave trade. Within a few decades, Brazil becomes the largest coffee producer in the world, a position it still holds today. By this time, all global coffee production comes from a single species, Coffea arabica, which originates in Ethiopia. Due to limited genetic diversity, the plant is vulnerable to disease. In the 1870s, coffee rust devastates production in Ceylon, and within 20 years, it spreads worldwide, affecting crops, especially in Asia. Only plants grown above 1,400 meters in altitude can resist rust. As a result, Europeans seek out new high-altitude regions for coffee cultivation. The British import plants to their new colonies near Ethiopia, where Arabica returns to its origins. Meanwhile, a new coffee species is discovered nearby. This new species, called Robusta, thrives in tropical climates, is more disease-resistant, produces higher yields, and has twice the caffeine content of Arabica. Robusta is gradually cultivated worldwide. By the early 20th century, coffee production surges worldwide, leading to a drop in prices. In 1929, the Wall Street crash causes a severe global economic crisis, and Brazil attempts to stabilize prices by burning its coffee stocks. At the same time, the Swiss company Nestlé develops a new method of preserving coffee by creating coffee powder, which only need hot water to prepare. During World War II, this instant coffee is given to soldiers on the front lines. War disrupts trade between Europe and Latin America, and fearing economic collapse, the United States persuades coffee-producing countries to limit their exports. The plan succeeds, and in 1962, the agreement is renewed with coffee producers worldwide. The International Coffee Organization is formed to regulate coffee prices by establishing quotas. However, in 1989, Brazil refuses to reduce its quotas, causing the agreement to collapse. Coffee-producing nations can now sell without limits, flooding the market. The situation worsens in the late 1990s when Vietnam quickly becomes the second-largest coffee producer, growing almost exclusively Robusta. The surplus forces many small producers to sell at a loss, leading to the emergence of fair trade initiatives aimed at ensuring decent incomes for small producers. Today, around 10 million tons of coffee are produced annually worldwide, mostly between the two tropics. Coffee is primarily exported to the Northern Hemisphere, where more than 2 billion cups are consumed daily, with Europe having the highest per capita consumption in the world.